Hello and welcome back. We are going to continue our work in Chapter 34, Chapter 32 if you're in the 11th edition, or excuse me, the 10th edition like I am right now. But the material is identical, folks, just so you know. I want to do a little bit of review before we dig into the exercises, and I just want to kind of reiterate what we did last time. We did go ahead and go to our Apollo server. We made sure everybody in class had an Apollo MySQL account. And that's, Apollo accounts, by the way, are accounts that we create here for students when you take certain courses. So like when you take your Web Programming 1 class, we create an Apollo account for you so that you can FTP your HTML files up to the server and you can see them on the web. And we consider that a pretty important thing to know how to do. And then when you get to the PHP class, which usually runs the same semester as this Java 2 class, we also create a MySQL database account for you. And depending on like how far in the semester you are along, if you're in this class, you might actually get to the database stuff before you get to it in PHP. However, you should be concurrently taking your database class at the same time. And in that case, maybe you've already had a MySQL connection from that class. So there's a few different ways we get accounts. For those of you that don't have accounts, I just want to remind you that you should email me to remind me to create them for you. So you need both a regular Apollo FTP account and an Apollo MySQL account. And I can do that. It really only takes a matter of a few minutes to set those up. And then you can go ahead and you can follow the video that I've posted into the course shell. And just to show you, so this is fall of 2019 right now, and I just posted this video in, not that one, I'm sorry, this one. And I apologize because I had uploaded it to YouTube before I left last week. I just never linked it back to the course shell. So it is linked up right now. If you do watch my videos on YouTube, what I do suggest is you can always just subscribe to the channel, and that way when anything new gets popped in there, you just see it automatically on your YouTube feed. And I see that I have a typo in there, but I'm going to fix that later. Okay. All right, so let's go back over here, and our objective right now is we're going to look back at what we just did. That's what the objective was. So last time before we left, we worked on a couple of different things. So I want to close some extraneous tabs here from older chapters and previous work. And then I'm going to put back up on the screen our simple JDBC exercise that basically is the in-chapter exercise, so not an assignment, but the in-chapter exercise that just gets you connected up to Apollo. So if you take a quick look at this code, it is predicated on a couple of different things. So I'm just going to review this really quick because I know that last week we were kind of in a hustle to get a lot of this done, and maybe the concepts you heard them but didn't really latch onto them. So I'm just going to repeat a couple of really key things before we move on to the exercises. So the first thing that we do is whenever we're going to connect to a database, we do need to establish all the database things that we need to do to make a Java program talk to a database. The first thing you'll notice is up on the top of line 1 is that we have an import for all the SQL libraries. So really, regardless of what database type you're using, just about all of them allow for the use of the structured query language within them, and that's why we have that listed at the top. You'll notice that I am using the wildcard at the top to pull in all the SQL tools. I'm really just following the book example, but that is not an unusual thing to do when you're working with databases. All right, so you see we did create a program, and we're not working with a GUI program here. That wasn't our goal at this point. The goal was just to run anything that would connect to the database. All right, so that's why the main program structure is all inside the main method, just like a regular console program. You'll notice also that because we are working with a database, and I'm going to tell you what, this isn't necessarily required, but whenever you're working with any sort of an external resource, whether it's a class file, a text file, a database, what have you, a network connection, it's good to put exception handling in because you don't want your program to crash just because it's not making a connection to the database. Okay, so that's why that's there. And if you don't have that in, you are going to notice sometimes either errors or warnings on some of your other database code that says, hey, there's no exception handler here, you're going to crash if it doesn't connect. Really not a good idea. All right, so that's there just in case. All right, so stepping through it, I did label everything so it's nice and easy to understand. So the first step is to load the JDBC driver. That's the generic driver for whatever database type that you're connecting to. All right, so that, in this case, we're connecting to a MySQL database. If you have some other type that you're connecting to, then that would be a different listing in this position here, obviously. Keep in mind that when you run these projects, when you're in Eclipse, that you have to go to this Java build path under properties and make sure that for libraries that you add an external jar file and then add the MySQL connector file that I provided for you, or the one that you downloaded from Oracle itself. And you can go out to the web, you can probably find a newer one than this, but this one works just fine. Haven't really been too many changes. The thing to just remember is that connector file is right here. Right on the right.
Every project that you do?
Every project that needs to connect to a database has to have an external link.
So it doesn't, like if you upload it for one, it's not going to work for all of them?
No,
okay.
it is project by project. Okay, so, and that's pretty important.
Yeah.
All right, but that's a good question, Nathan. Good question. All right, so you got to make sure that that's included there. The next thing that happens is we run the connection class, and that just sets up a way for us to connect and gives us basically the URL to the machine. Notice that the prefix of the URL is MySQL, right, to match up with the connector type. And if you were using like SQL Server or Oracle or whatever, the connection thing would look different. And this is based on the fact that you have created a database in your MySQL account on Apollo named exactly this. For those of you that do not have that piece in place, you can use exactly what you see on the screen here. You notice my password is not a really difficult one to remember. And you know, and I realize you guys could go in and be destructive with it too, but I'm hoping you're not. But in the interim, until you have your own database running, you could connect to my stuff just to get it to work. And I'm okay with that. Ultimately, I would prefer that you have your own database account, so you go through the process of connecting up through the command line, creating a database, using phpMyAdmin to interface with your database, and also just getting it to work, because there's a satisfaction that I think comes with it.
Yeah.
All right. The next part of this is we create a statement, and that basically allows us to generate SQL statements and push them back to the server. And then we also need to have a container to not only execute the query, but to receive the result of the query. So you see that the result set, which holds whatever comes back from the database, is the result of running a statement and executing the query. The query itself is in plain text in the same exact syntax you would use in SQL on any database program. So if I was working from the MySQL prompt, I could type that in. If I was on MySQL Workbench, I could type that in. If I was on SQL Server or whatever, you know, that's the beautiful thing about SQL, is it works across all those databases. Now, because we're expecting to have multiple results coming back, we do set up a while loop that basically just steps through all the results, as many as there are, if there's 1 or 1,000, and for each one, it will do output to the console and just get our results back up on the screen. That's all that line is doing. The other thing that you always do when you're working with a database is you close the connection, because when you are reading, and really more importantly, writing or updating a record, you know, in the process of writing or updating, the record is locked until you move out of the field, and it's just considered polite to close the connection so somebody else can connect to the same resource, and then also lock in the data. You'll notice that because this is a console program, for each one of these steps, I have console output, right? And the console output will drop down in the console down here and just show us that it's working. And when we start converting our stuff over to a GUI program, we'll actually take all these steps here and we will throw that into a method that we'll create, or a function, if you will, that will include in all our programs, including the console output. So even though we'll be writing a GUI program or a web program, the console will always operate and give us output so we can see, hey, database even connect? You can jump back to the console, take a look and say, oh yeah, it did connect, we're okay. All right, so let's go ahead and just run this again just to refresh our memories on how it looks when it's actually running. One little tidbit before I hit the run button here. If you are working off campus or you're connected to the guest network on Wi-Fi on campus, make sure you are using your VPN software to connect to gateway. Otherwise, you will not connect to the database. Okay, so that's a really critical step. If you guys need to set up VPN software on your computers, I think they've made it a little bit more difficult now, where you actually kind of have to bring your computer to campus to do it. Although I have had some students said they found workarounds for that. I have some suspicions, though, about that. So we'll see. The URL for the VPN? Excellent question, Caitlin. If you actually have the software loaded, there's the URL right here. It's vpn-home.gtc.edu. I had some of my students were typing in Apollo here.
That's what I was
Yeah. No, that's not the right answer. That's just the web server and database server. They have a separate machine that handles the VPN connections. It is critical, though, with Gateway, when you connect to our VPN server, our VPN server absolutely requires this specific piece of software to connect. You can't use a generic VPN client. That's not true with a lot of organizations, but for Gateway it is true. All right, so that's Cisco AnyConnect Secure Mobility client. Yep, and this will be self-updating too. So when you connect to Gateway, they always enforce you to upgrade it every time there's an upgrade available for it. So you want to make sure that you allow that to happen. If you don't have the VPN client installed, I think if you go to that same URL typing HTTPS, and I'm going to test it. Of course, I am on campus, so I know it's going to work. But it's vpn-home, right, like that, with an HTTPS. And that brings you here. And then you can log on and download the client right from here. That is. But here's the catch. If you can't connect to Gateway, I don't think you can get to this page unless you're on VPN. That's the irony of it. So if you have a laptop, you want to bring it to campus and hook it up here. Yeah, you know, Robert, that's a really good question. So one of my onliners is asking if it might conflict with his work stuff. You know, all you can do is try. If not, you know, you can always run the local database if you have to, and just screenshot it really well so I know that it works.
It should just add another profile.
Yeah, and Vaughn, I think you're correct. I think it should just add another profile to your setup and you should be okay. All right, let's go back and actually run this now and take a look at how it operates. So I'm going to run it. So it's compiling right now. And then you see driver loaded, database connected. It ran our query and pulled back a couple of results. All right, just to also a reminder, once you have that database account on Apollo, you can connect to this URL that you see, apollo.gtc.edu phpMyAdmin, and log into your account with your credentials. And you should be able to go in and actually look at the databases you're working with. My account is the one at the top. That's not by accident. I put it there on purpose, which is why I chose that username, right? So I don't have to go hunting. And then the database that we're working with is Java Book and all the tables that are added by virtue of what we did in the last video. So make sure you watch the first video to understand how we got to here.
Yeah.
Right? We even had to do a couple of things, like we actually built a table because we were having issues connecting, and we thought it was because, and it wasn't at all anything to do with the table. It was all to do with, what was the problem? Was it the connector code? I forget. I don't know.
Yeah.
But either way, these are just, you know, the basics of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on and go to exercise 34.1. And let's read the instructions from the book and see if we can get this to work. All right. So this is the assignment instructions here, folks. Let me make that just a little bit bigger for you. All right. It says, access and update a staff table. Write a program that views, inserts, and updates staff information stored in the database as shown in figure 32.27a. Notice from that diagram that that is a GUI program, not a console program. So we're going to build this interface first, and then we're going to connect our program to the database and then read information into the fields. Pretty cool, actually, right? Yeah, it is pretty cool. All right, the View button displays a record with a specified ID. The Insert button inserts a new record. The Update button updates the record for the specified ID. So we're really going to perform a number of the CRUD operations here, right? We're going to perform create, which is insert. We're going to perform retrieve, which is view. Update, which is update. Right? And then the only one we're not doing is delete, at least initially. All right, so you guys ready to do this?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. All right, so this is a multi-step process. Even though our interface is simple, the code to do the other stuff is not necessarily quite as simple as you might think. And notice that what they've done here is, just in case you don't have the table already in your database, they give you the SQL code that you can run either from a prompt or from whatever program you want and go ahead and create that table. Now that SQL script that I gave you in the assignment description, this one here, and the one that we walked through in the video to get the database built and content preloaded, has already created a staff table for us. So you can see right here I have a staff table, and if I click browse on it, I see that it's empty.
Awesome.
Okay, so when we start out, there's nothing in here. It's just as simple as that. So if I come back to the root of the database and I look at the structure of this table, I see here are all my fields. And I'm going to leave this up on screen with a very particular reason. Right? You'll notice that these fields do match up with what's listed here. Right? And what's important here is if you didn't have this and you have some other database running, you can go through and actually make sure that the database has all these characteristics, right? So an ID field, that's up to 9 characters, null's not allowed, right? That's also a primary key, so you can see it down here. Last name, first name, but most importantly, the syntax is case sensitive, so you can't have first name with a capital F, it's not going to work. All right, so it tells you your data types and all the fields that you need. All right, and then if we go back here and take a look, are all these listed there? Yes, they are. Is the ID field the primary key? Yes, it is. Are they all set up just like in that diagram? Yes, they are. Okay, so we're good. We have the structure, we just don't have any data in there yet. So when we do get the program running, one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to insert data, just so we have something to work with. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up Eclipse now and get into the mode where we're going to be creating these items. And what I'm doing right now is on my second screen, I'm bringing up my cheat sheets. Now, because we're creating a GUI application, we are going to start by building the interface first. Okay? And you guys have had enough GUI experience now where some of this stuff should go pretty quick. Okay? So I'm kind of like making some assumptions here about how we're going to proceed. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to go to my chapter 16 code, which is conveniently loaded up here, and I'm going to see, is there anything here I can borrow from? And I'm going to pull up this one where we were working with text fields, because I think we're going to be working with text fields again, right? Yeah, right on. We are. So there's a lot we can borrow from this setup. So the first thing that we're going to do is, well, let's create a new program. So let's go to our chapter 34 project folder, I'm going to right click the source and create a new class. All right. What is the book calling this exercise? They're calling it access and update a staff table. I think I might just call it exercise 34.1 is what I'm going to call it. All right, so exercise 34_1. Keeping in mind I'm working with the older version of the book, same difference, which is chapter 32. Let's go ahead and include the main method. And there's our beginning code. We know that this is going to be a GUI program, so we're going to extend application. We're going to do our control space to bring in our libraries, our JavaFX libraries. We are going to go ahead and hover and add the unimplemented method, which is the start method. I'm going to move that start method to the top here and push the main method down. We know, that's probably not a bad idea. Yeah, sometimes it does it like that, doesn't it?
Sometimes it automatically does primary stage.
Yeah, and you know what? I haven't figured out the reason why that's the case. All right, but it's going to throw a little bit of an error right now until we fix that. But I know that what we're going to copy in, which is our scene and our stage and all that stuff, right? As I typically call it. We are calling it primary stage, so it will match up once we paste it over. Let's put that way at the bottom of the start method for right now. That should
Do stage, primary stage.
Yeah. Yeah, you still have to indicate a data type, right? Yeah, and that's what was missing. And really, the arg0 was the problem. Yep, there we go. All right, now the underlines are gone. I'm looking at what I did last time, and I just want to save us a little bit of work in terms of configuring things. I guess I didn't size anything, and here, ultimately what I threw in was a pane called pane, and you know what, let's just call this staff database. That's what I called it last time. All right. Since we're building structure first, I'm working from the outside in. So we got the stage, we got the scene, right? Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the structure that's going to hold all the stuff. Looking at this looks a lot like some of the work that we've done already, right? And I'm going to say that the border pane is the best structure to hold all of this. Also with the understanding that I'm probably going to nest other pane structures within. So the way I'm seeing it is the bottom part is where the buttons are. That's going to be the bottom part of the border pane. Where all the text fields are, that's going to be the center. And then I don't know if you guys are noticing this, so right up here where it says record found, it's kind of like a little indicator. That's going to be in the top.
That's like an if else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe. We're not going to worry about left and right, but we're going to use the top, center, and bottom. So we are going to use a border pane to do this work. So let's go ahead and create that structure and get it going. So right here, border pane, control space to get our library in there. I'm just going to call this pane, and then let's make it a new border pane, of course. Empty parens. All right. I already know that I'm going to do a top, a center, and a bottom. And I'm trying to do this efficiently, folks. So I am doing a little bit of copy pasting. I'm just telling you that square up front because I want it to go a little bit more efficiently. So there's my top, center, and bottom. I already have objects that I intend to put in there. And so let's talk about those and start building them. Let's start with the easy stuff first, okay? We are going to create basically a few different areas. And I'm going to create that one in the top area. I'm going to put a special text label. It's not going to be a text field. We don't want people typing into it. We just want text to appear. and I'm going to use the label format, like the same thing I would use to label a text box.
Right.
Okay. And I'm going to put that actually outside the start method as a global. I'm going to set it as a private variable, and I'm going to create a label, and its name will be LBL status, just like I have listed below. So I'm not putting it inside of a pane or anything weird like that. I'm just creating it and brute force adding it to the page, and it's going to start out empty. Okay. This does require a library, so make sure you do your add of the JavaFX library. And so one of the structures here is now matched up. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the buttons, because I see those as being a little bit easier to do than the text fields. It's a little less work. All right, so I'm going to start by first creating the buttons, and I'm going to put those up on the global level as well. So I'm going to separate them out a little bit. All of them will be privates because we don't want anything outside the program to access them. All right, and then control space for your library. It's being a little sluggish. I'm not sure that, oh, it did it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and name it. And we have 4 buttons that are shown on the screen. So if you go back to the book and take a look, they have view, insert, update, and clear. Okay, those are the buttons we're creating. So let's go ahead and name the first one BTN view. All right, that's going to be a new button. As an argument, we're going to throw the text that's going to go on the button for view. All right, we have a few more buttons to create. I'm going to save a little time and just do a little copy paste here. And so we're also going to add update, insert, and clear. And I'm using the same naming convention as I did already. So I'll give you a moment to type that in. Now those buttons are going to go in the bottom pane of the border pane. And I think a good structure to put them into before they go into the border pane is an Hbox, right? Horizontal layout. It makes a lot of sense to do it that way. So inside my start method here, right above the border pane, I'm going to create a Hbox. And I'm going to call that BTN box, my button box. Isn't that clever? We do need a library here. Control space. Let's add that in. And then we're going to instantiate a new Hbox. Empty parens. Actually, let's put 5 in there. They should have a little bit of spacing in between them. All right. And then we can just go ahead and add these buttons that we created into the structure right away. We don't have to wait. Right, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to get children, more than one object, so add all, and then list your buttons. We also want them to appear in the center of the screen. So let's do a little alignment. So let's position them in the center. You'll notice the POS is underlined, so we have to add the library for positioning. JavaFX geometry. And we have that one. So now if we go back to our border pane now, label status and button box are both correctly not underlining any longer. Okay. Now we have a little bit of busy work to do, which means it's a whole lot more code than what we've been doing. I'm going to start actually from the bottom up, because this is how my brain thinks. So I want to kind of tap you into like the strangest that is my brain. So I'm going to create a VBox, and here's my thinking here, folks. I'm going to create a vertical box pane, right, to contain several Hboxes with the text fields and labels. And really all that's for is just to make it look nice and orderly. I'm just going to call this VBox. You know why? Because that's what I called it last time, because I'm copying from my old code. So we're just going to create a new VBox. 5 pixels for separation is fine. And then I'm going to prepare to start adding stuff to the VBox, like so. So kind of like what we did with the Hbox. So I set it up so we can get children, and we will add multiple objects. And I've already written this code, so I'm just pasting it in. But when I look at the structure here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of information. That's why I have 5 Hboxes listed here, 5 horizontal boxes. So now I got to build all those. Okay. Right. That's why those are all underlining red right now. If you haven't saved your work so far, not a bad time to Control S. All right, so let's go ahead and start building those Hboxes, and let's do them one at a time. And I'm going to do it like this, really systematically. All right. So I know I have to do this, and I have to repeat it, right? So why not repeat, 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 then change them. 2, 3, 4, and 5. All of those are going to need objects added to them. However, I have not created those objects yet, right? Maybe now is a good time to start building those objects. So let's take stock of what we need to build. So I'm going to go through here and count. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 labels, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 text fields. And then my brain says, well, these all match up with what's up here, right? And then every once in a while I get somebody that actually looks at it critically and goes, but wait, there's no box for email. You guys noticing that? Yeah. So really we need 9. Because I'm going to, we have an email field, why not put it in? Right? All right. So we need 9 of each. 9 labels, 9 text fields. This is just a mechanical process that we're going to go through. I'm going to declare all of those up at the top here as private global variables. And what I prefer to do is kind of do this systematically. I'm going to work top to bottom from what's listed. So I'm going to just paste in the first one. So there's our label for ID and the text field for ID. The text field, because it's the first time I'm adding it, needs the library. Let's do that. I'm trying to do this very slowly and patiently because I know you guys are trying to type this. There are some copy-paste. You could copy-paste each one of these and paste it down and adjust. So if you're so inclined, please do. Now you're saying, why did I do last name first? Because that's what they have on the screen. So for me it makes sense to proceed that way. Let's do first name. Let's do middle initial. Yes, I could paste these all in at once, but I figure you guys are typing, so. Address. City. State. Telephone. And there's one that I didn't type in last time, but I'm going to go ahead and type it in. I'm just going to paste this last one, and I'm going to change the label to email. So that means I'll change this text here as well to email. And we'll call it text field email. And now we have all of our text fields created. And then I'm just tightening this all up. And see, I'm kind of grouping things together. You don't really have to do that. I just do that because at least if I'm like troubleshooting something, I know where everything is. It's kind of all together. You know, that's kind of my thinking. But you don't have to leave the gaps in there if you don't want to. But those are all globals. The reason we leave them as globals is this, folks. We are going to write methods outside the stage that are going to interact with these fields. So I don't want them inside the stage, you know, in order to do the work. To me, it makes more sense to make them globals. All right, let's go ahead and start building out these Hboxes now. As we've like dumped in all this code to create Hboxes, but now we gotta like actually do the work. So for each one of these, all right, so I'm gonna pull in the code here. Oops, wrong copy paste. So I'm going to start building each one of these Hboxes. So each one of them is going to have me get children, and then what I'm doing is I'm just working top to bottom. So I'm looking at this PDF, and the first row is just the ID label and field, right? So that's why that's all that I put in there. Okay. The next one is going to have last name label, last name text field, first name label, first name text field, middle initial label, and middle initial text field. So I'm pasting that all in, like so. The other thing I'm going to do is, because the middle initial only really needs enough room for one item in it, right? Oops. I'm going to set a column count for it to 1. Some people will argue it should really be 2. Because when you have a middle initial, you put a dot in. This is like a database programmer's like argument thing, right? It's the kind of silly stuff they argue over. Well, a middle initial should only be 1 character. Well, what if the middle initial is actually 2 characters? Or what if they want the dot in there? Or, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because some people have more than 1 middle initial. Well, we're setting it up for 1. Sorry, folks. You have to code around it if you don't like it. We'll just skip it. All right, in the third one, we're going to put the address. In the fourth one, we're going to do city and state. Yes, and don't worry, we'll take a pause soon, and then you guys can come back and type to your heart's content. And then the fifth line, we're going to put in the label for phone, the label for, or the text for phone, and then we added something, right? LBL email and TXT email, like so. A little expansion from what I did last time. Some semesters I do this, and some semesters I don't. All right. And then all of those Hboxes, right, that we just were populating, all of those feed into the V box that you see right at the bottom there. So one structure feeding into another. So now I think we have everything accounted for. Visually. So we have our interface built. So here's what we should do next. We should run this and just make sure that everything's on screen kind of like as we're anticipating. Kind of waiting for it to pop up, but it's not popping up. Yeah. I say I always get a student that's smarter than me. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't do this, did you? Yeah, I didn't tell it to launch. Okay. You're right. Here we go. Alright. Let's go ahead and hit play and let's see what our interface looks like. Alright. And you notice up here there's kind of a blank line. You know, this isn't the prettiest of things, folks, right? Can we agree? I could really make it look a lot nicer. You know, and frankly, I just kind of don't care. You know, as long as it works. So it's on screen. That's okay with me right now. We can always make it look prettier later, but all the stuff we need is there in roughly the right places. And so now we're ready to do all the database work. So, before we jump into the database piece, we're about an hour in now in class. Let's take a break for 5 minutes. All right. And all right, now that we know our interface is good, now we need to start doing all the database stuff. And it's going to be a combination of different things. So we know we have a bunch of buttons down at the bottom of the screen, and that each one of those buttons is going to be tied to an event handler that then will trigger some sort of a method that will do all the database interaction. However, we first need to connect to the database. Now here's the beauty. The database connection stuff that we did in the simple JDBC, that stuff is still basically all valid, but we have to kind of do a little bit of work first before we can utilize it. I don't just want to dump this code into the database like right into the start method or the main method. I actually want to run it as a method, and the beauty is once you have this in there, whatever database you connect to, like on Apollo, you can kind of just pick up this code and move it over, change the database name, and boom, you're in. Right, so that's kind of the nice thing. So we're going to jump down to the bottom of the program here, and below the main method, I'm going to create a new method. I'm going to make it private because it's just going to be internal to the application. We don't want the outside world hitting our database. And I want you to understand why. First of all, we put the password in here in plain text, right? So you don't want it publicly accessible. I mean, that's kind of like one reason why. All right, let's get our curlies in there. And now we're going to do something else. Because we are working with a database, we either have to put an exception handler here, or we can use a try-catch. So I'm going to error and I'm going to go with the try-catch, mostly because that's what I did last time. It's easier for me to copy my code than it is to build something from scratch. And we are going to pull in all the stuff that we need. So first of all, we need to pull in the pieces that we already have coded, but we're going to be a little more selective about how we do this. So for example, right here, we're going to grab this code, and I'm going to go bit by bit here. I'm not going to do it all at once. Right, so we're going to pull in the connector. Right away your brain should say, wait, but we don't have this connector in here yet, right? So let's go do that right now before we forget. I'm going to go up to the project, file, do properties. Oh wow, it's already there. Right? That external library is already, why is it already there? Because we did the other work in chapter 34. It's part of the same project, so the connector file is already down here in this reference library. It's already there. If it wasn't, if you were doing this from scratch, if you made it a different project, you would have to come and add the connector. So that's important to check that. All right. The next thing that we want to do is grab the connection code. So I'm going to grab these two pieces. Yes, I'm keeping the console output lines because I still want to get status updates from the method in my console so I can see that it's working. Just really simple as that. So we're going to set up the connection. We're going to put in all the connection parameters. And you see that they're just listed here in plain text. And the output to show that the database is connected. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, like, since the database is connected, I'm going to output to my status field, way at the top, that little thing that we did. We're going to do set text, and then inside there, you know, I'm just going to say the same thing I just said, database connected. So the user sees it too. Okay? And then we also need to get another piece in here, and that's the statement part, but wait. Okay, so here's where we're going to put on our brakes for a moment. Is this the place to declare the statement? Because you see, I'm creating a class here, right, that's localized to this method. I actually, because I want this to operate outside of this structure, I'm actually going to pre-declare a statement up at the top with all my other privates.
Okay.
And I'm just going to create it before I initialize it. So I'm just going to come up here and maybe right below the buttons on a global level, I'm just going to create a statement that does require a library. So let's do control space and throw it in. Are we missing anything here? Or did you notice that the SQL, did I add that stuff in? It happened all automatically. And I'm just leaving those up there. All right. So our statement now is global. That's where our query statements go, folks. So now I can come down here and I can add a line like this that allows us to basically do what we did before, which is to create the statement based on the connection that we have. All right, so this is throwing me a little bit here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking that we need to, instead of just listing these individually, because really what I would need to do is add the statement library, right? So I think if I hovered over this, if you want to like minimize what you're throwing in, but I think that what might be easier is just to do this, folks. Oh, see what it's doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's, I think, the simpler fix. Let's just do this. I think that should fix it. See if I'm right. Did I misspell something? Now I'm checking out. Checking out my code to see what I misspelled. And then I'm also looking at all the libraries I have. I think that part of the problem is this. See, this statement's conflicting because this is calling it in from a higher level. I'm just going to remove that and let's see if that fixes it. Yep, that fixed it. Okay. Next thing that I want to do is I want to throw in a catch for this, just in case this doesn't work, right? Let's throw in a catch, and we're going to put in the type of exception is going to be a SQL exception, and I'm just going to call it X for exception. Get our curly brackets in there. Now, if it fails, if it does not connect, and actually, now I'm looking at this. Now, I wasn't doing a SQL exception. Interesting. So, in my last bit of code, I did this. Okay. Standard exception. Oh, and I see it actually took care of a different error. Okay, so now I'm trying to see my logic here, basically. And you know what? I'm going to name this with an uppercase E. And the only reason I'm doing that is because that's what I did last time and I want to copy paste. So on the console, I'm going to output something is wrong with the database. Help! I'm trying to have a sense of humor about it. Here, some exclamations. And then we should also give a message to the user that the user can see is database connection failed, please try again. Seem reasonable? Not too terse? Okay. All right, so not only are we setting up a situation where the program's not going to crash if we're throwing, if we're not getting that connection, we're also setting it up so that at least they kind of know what's going on, right? So if the database stuff doesn't work, then at least they have a message knowing what's going on. All right, so that's our connection string. Now, when we run our program, after the stage and the scene and all the graphical components are built, that's where I'm going to throw in the command to initialize the database, right there, just like that. And I must have, did I name it with a lowercase I? I sure did. You know what? Doesn't matter. Right? Case sensitive? Doesn't matter. All right. Next thing that we want to do is now we want to start throwing event handlers in to work off all the buttons. The first one we should probably throw in is the view, right? I think that's the first button that's listed. And we're going to set up our event handler. We're going to use the lambda expression handler. And we're going to call in methods that match up with the button names. And notice, I don't have that created yet, right? And conversely, I know that I'm also going to create these other ones, so let's just paste those in right away. And see how I have them commented out for right now? And we'll add them in incrementally. I'm going to jump over now way back to the bottom of my code, and we need to build a method that's going to actually allow us to view stuff from the database. This is going to be private once again. It's not returning anything, and we're going to call it view, and then curlies. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a string that's going to hold the query string that we use to view whatever it is we're viewing. If you read the instructions for the assignment, it said that you should be able to pull back any record by entering the ID number. So what we're going to be querying on is the ID field. So user will be able to type a number into the text box for the ID, click on view, and it should pull back the record. That's the goal. So then we need the SQL string that's going to create that. So now if you're an old school SQL person, you type all your actual commands in uppercase, and I'm just kind of doing that right now. You don't have to. What table are we selecting from? The staff table, where ID, which is all lowercase, equals, right? But here's where we get a little tricky. So if I was like typing this command normally, I would actually include into the mix here like the ID number, right? If I was just like typing it, right? But what we really want to happen is that whatever is typed into that field is inserted into single quotes, because that's how you would do it if you were writing SQL statement. You would have single quotes, and let's say the ID was 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how we would query it, right? And that would be the end of the statement. But I have to get those single quotes in there, and I have to put in the middle of it whatever we're getting from the text field. All right, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put in that single quote, and then I'm going to put in a concatenate. And then here's where I have to get in all that other stuff. But I know whatever I type here, I'm going to be concatenating that to a closing single quote. So I want to make sure I type that in first so I don't forget to do it later. Because that's the silly little thing that'll make the whole program break. So I want to pull in that text box that has the ID in it. And I just scrolled up through my code on the other screen here, and I noticed that that field is called txt ID. And from that field, I want to get text, right? And that's just going to pull in whatever text is in the box. And then I also want to issue a secondary method here called trim. And the goal of this command, and notice you can just read it right there, is if somebody accidentally types in a leading space or a trailing space, sometimes people do that, it automatically cleans it up.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it is. Silly and powerful all at the same time. All right, so there's the SQL statement with a thing bundled in there to be able to redirect from the text field. So that's our SQL statement. And now, as we try to run this query, we do need, and there was a keyword there, we do need to try it because there's a possibility it might fail. Right? Because what if you do the query and there's nothing there? You want the program to crash? No, right? So you got to set up something to accommodate for that. So we're going to start by doing the result set, which is what we did in the other program, right? I'm just going to call it rs equals the statement, that's what I'm calling my statement, abbreviated, dot execute query, and then what's the query we're feeding in? You could type the whole query into this spot, by the way. However, I think it's a little more elegant to actually save it as a string and call it in. It also gives you some programmatic flexibility, frankly. All right? And then if that happens, we're going to do this other method called load fields based upon that result set. Now you're noticing how that one is highlighting. So it's not a built-in method. This is one that we're going to build that's going to do that work for every method that we run, whether we're inserting, updating, deleting, clearing, whatever. We're going to write a separate method that just reads the stuff in and puts it on the screen in the right spot. So now we're going to take a quick little pause here. We are going to come back and write the catch. So if you're thinking I'm forgetting, I'm not. And that is going to be a SQL exception. So I'm just going to type that in, and I'm going to call that X. I'm going to put in my curlies. I'm going to come back and type some more stuff here just to remember that I'm going to do it. But I'm going to do this first. Now you notice that it recognizes that this method doesn't exist, and it's got a little quick fix, right? Create method. All right, let's do that. Let's create the method, and then when you come down here, it will have been pre-created for you. All right. We are going to go with a private. We are going to go with a void, and we are going to feed a result set into it. And what this method is going to do, it's going to take that result set from the query and then just organize it and put it back into the right boxes, right? Because otherwise, like when we saw from the console command just like put it out as text on the screen and we did a while loop, right? What this is going to do is it's going to take whatever it gets back from the query, which should only be one result, and then feed it back into the text boxes. All right? So we're going to begin by actually putting in an if statement, and the if statement is going to check for if the result set has a result. And we're saying next, not expecting that there's going to be multiple results, but that there's going to be any, is really the way to look at it. And provided there is, then we will go ahead, and what does this say? All right, so yeah, we should have added a declaration to throw SQL exception. So notice how that found that for me. Thank you very much, Eclipse. All right, I just realized here in class that we just demonstrated getting to the point of making this work, and I'm not sure where we left off when I hit pause on the recording. Hopefully it wasn't too long ago. So what I'm going to demonstrate to the viewers watching the video is this. What we did, and I'm sorry if this is repeat, is we did set up a method for initializing the database, which is here. So you can pause the video for a second to pull that in. So this contains many of the same things that we did in our previous program to connect to the database. One little caveat, I did change some of the statements up top, and we're doing all of the SQL stuff here, so if you have any other weird database stuff up here, you might want to remove it and just throw that in. The other thing that I did is I added the private statement here for the statement that runs the query. That sits as a global because we need it to pass around. We created an event handler for the view method, and then we came down here and created the view method. The view method will execute every time we hit that view button. The query string is stored as a string, and notice that here we're extracting information directly from the text field, and because that's a query based on the ID field, there are single quotes that right above my little I-beam here, right here, and those have to be encapsulated in double quotes because we're getting the text from the text field, and then the trim method removes leading and trailing spaces from the method before the, just in case the type of space at the end. We put that all into a try-catch, so it pulls back a result set based upon the query that we send to it. The query result set is then sent off to another method called load fields, and the whole purpose of that one is to take the result set, which is going to be basically tabular data, or like and then break it down into the column indexes, which match up with the indexes of the table fields for the staff table, so they match up with these index numbers in the database. And then we're feeding those from those index values back into the right text field on the screen, so we're populating the screen, and then we're also changing the status field up at the top saying the record found. If for some reason no result set comes back, like it did the first time we tried this, so if you type in an ID number and that ID number does not exist, you'll get this message up at the top. If the whole query and database thing all fail, you'll get a different message up on the screen saying the query failed, meaning you've got a problem here. That the user hopefully should never see that, right? And then we also do an output to our console to make sure that we know that there's an issue. All right, and I did pre-create event handlers for the three other options here, although we haven't gotten that far yet. But they're ready to go in case we need them. Let's go ahead and demonstrate the running of the program again. The first thing you'll notice is that we are pulling back the console messages right from these lines 92 and 95 here, where we are connecting to the database. So that initializes right when the program starts up in the start method. At this point, the view button is waiting for us to type something into the ID field and check it. And I'm going to put in an ID number I know does not exist in the database and hit view. And notice it says record not found. Okay. What we did do preemptively is, because this table does not come with data inside of it, is we actually went in and added information in there. All right, and this is, I just put like my own stuff in there. No, that's not my real address, by the way. And the way that we did that is we did it from this interface here. We clicked on insert, and that took us to this thing where we can actually type data in, hit go, and it inserts it into it. So we did that manually, folks. All right. Now, having seen what information actually resides in there, I can come back up here and change the ID field to a record I know does exist. And then when I hit view, you'll notice it pulls the information back from the database and gives us a status message that says record found. So that's successful up until this point. All right, I'm going to pause the video here for just a sec. All right, so now we're going to work on the remaining methods, and you can see here I'm going to start grabbing these statements that I created, and I'm going to start building them one at a time. All right, so let's go ahead and do insert. Notice that's highlighting, and then I'm going to go ahead and create that method. It does have a tool for doing it automatically, and it's treating it as an object, but you know what? We're not going to return an object. We are just going to put void here. And we're not going to worry about returning a method or returning anything, but we are going to begin once again by creating a query. This query, very frankly, is a little complicated, and let me explain why. We're going to start by doing a SQL command, and those of you that haven't done, a lot of SQL yet, this might feel a little intimidating. So there's a command in SQL that allows you to insert a record into a table, right? So if you saw what we were doing in PHPMyAdmin here, right? So the staff table, if I did an insert, and I'm going to add another record. So I'm going to add 2222, and I'm going to pick on Nathan here, and we'll put his info in here. All right, I'm using your full name, by the way. What's your middle initial, Nathan? A. We'll come up with an imaginary address here for him.
Cool.
And I'm just going to guess you live in Kenosha. Is that true? Close enough. All right. You're in Wisconsin. Here's your phone number. And your email is nathan@whatever.com. All right. And when I hit go, I want you to notice right up here at the top, what PHPMyAdmin actually does, and if I give it a zoom, it writes an insert statement. And you know what? This actually has the format of the insert statement that we need to type into our program. Now here's the catch. Wherever you see, right, so all of these identify the field. So all it does is say insert into the staff table is how it reads in this order. So these are all the columns in the table in the order that they appear. So when I feed it the values, they have to be in the same order as the order I declared here. The catch is that these values will be typed into the form. So I can't just use plain text, but what I do have to do is I have to put in the single quote, like see the single quote right here? Then I have to concatenate to it a get text with a trim from the form, close the single quote, put in a comma, and then put in another single quote, concatenate to it, etc. So this is what it looks like when you convert it to code, folks. So I'm going to give you the whole statement and just drop it in there, because if I type it little by little, we'll be here all night, right? Now you notice that I trimmed out or omitted the email thing, but you know what? I'm going to add that back in. Heck, why not? Right? All I have to do is fix all this stuff at the end. Oh no, right? That's not as clean as I would like it, but I'm just very cautiously and carefully grab this and make sure I do it right. That's kind of the whole key. And I think that should be right, because I have one semicolon. That's not the Java semicolon, that's the SQL semicolon. That's why it's inside the double quote, because SQL uses semicolons too. And then this semicolon actually closes the statement. All right. So once I have that query put together, then I'm going to put it all into, and actually that can be out here, honestly. And this, it's interesting how it indented, but whatever. I'm going with it. We're going to do another try, and then we're going to execute a statement, kind of like we did before. So there's an insert query, so that populates here to execute. And then we're going to put a thing at the top if it works. If it fed into the database successfully, we're going to say inserted record successfully, I guess would be smart to do too. All right. And then we'll have a catch part of this, just in case it fails, because maybe something is wrong either with our statement or, who knows. Add our curlies. And then we're going to put a message up on the screen saying insert failed, and it'll give us the error code up at the top. Not that the user necessarily even cares. So I might argue that this might not be necessary for the user, right? But, you know, I'm going to leave it there. You might also consider doing console output too. So if you wanted to do like a system out print line, right? Here you could output to your console. Insert succeeded. Not that I think that really matters on the console, but I'm just showing you that you can do it. And then here I probably would copy this verbatim, because in the console I would want to see an error message so I know how to fix it in the future.
It would point to your area of code.
Yeah. So now we've created this, and that's all it takes to do the insert. So let's save this, and let's go ahead and run it and see if it works. All right. First, let's test our view thing again. Does it work?
Oh.
Did I hit view, right?
Yeah.
So why?
At the top.
Oh, yeah. See, this is why we have the exception handling in there. It says, insert failed. Column count doesn't match the value count at row 1. Okay. At 1, oh, 1, so that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, no, that's right. We didn't even trigger the insert method, though. That's the thing that really perplexes me about it. Okay. Private void. Is this all closed out, Roberts? Your event handler. What did I screw it up? Ah. See?
Oh, they're both.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. That's what you get for copy pasting. Good catch. All right, see, my online student caught it and nobody here in the classroom did. All right, let's close this and run it again. All right, no errors this time. Let's put in this ID number, check view. Let's put in Nathan's ID number, check view. Now, let's go ahead and insert a new record. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change all the stuff in these fields, right? So I'll go 333s, and let's do Smith, John, A is fine, Kenosha's fine, and email at email.com. Alright, we're going to hit insert, crossing our fingers. Alright, so we failed again. So it says insert failed, column count doesn't match value count at row 1. Alright, notice I got the same error message here, right? So now we got to figure out the why. Alright, so here's what we need to figure out. When we're doing the insert, I see it already. Remember? Yeah, so I added the email. Remember, this was commented out, right? And then up here, insert into. I'm not calling it. And I think it's, you know, and I should check. I should look at the actual database, folks. Is that one? Is the structure of this one? It's email lowercase. Okay. So let's go back to the code. So it's email lowercase. Yeah, so they're saying that these, the count of these, does not match the count of these. All right, so let's save it. Let's run it. All right, I really don't need to check the view thing again, right?
Never.
give them a baloney email account here. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's do insert. Okay, it says successful. You know what? I don't believe it. Let's go back to the database, right? And see, this is why you might want to have your database tool up and running, is so that you can go in there and see if it's actually going in there. So now we can browse it, and there it is, right? So that was a success. Let's move on to the next piece then. Let's close our program from running, and let's figure out the next part. The next part, to me, seems like it would be update. And actually, you know, I might argue it might be easier to do clear first, right? And I'm not going to make the same copy-paste mistake this time. I'm going to make sure that and I'm assuming I called it button clear. Right, okay, it matched up. But we do need to create that method, so let's create clear. It is going to be set to void. And then here's all we have to do to make that happen, folks. To clear out the stuff that's in there, the stuff that we're seeing, all it takes is this. We're just setting the text for each field to null. You know what? I feel so confident about that one, I'm not even going to test it. Let's move on to update. Alright? So I'm going to do this one. Is this the order they're listed in? No. But that's okay. I can now get rid of these comments. I don't need them. We want to create that method, so I'm just going to hover. Once again, it made it an object, but we want it to just be a void and not return anything. It's just going to do its work. Alright. Once again, we have to start with a query. Now think about how an update works relative to an insert. What's the command change? Update, yeah, right? And set. Very good. I'm glad you guys actually remember that. I'm proud of you. Because I think a lot of database people like forget that, like the day after database class, right? The moment you walk away from Christian, basically. And you see I have the email one commented out, but we are going to use it, so I'm going to do that. And this is the syntax for it. So the update, what are we updating? The staff table. And then we're setting these values. And then we go field by field. For last name, we're setting it to whatever we're getting from the text field and trimming it. And we just step through each one of the things sequentially. Pretty simple, right? It is, actually. All right. So once we have the statement concocted, then we're going to do a try, like we've been doing. And once again, we're just going to use the same techniques we used before. We're going to execute the query, and then if it works, which we assume it will, it'll say label or record updated up at the top in the label. And otherwise, we're going to throw in a catch, like so. It'll catch the SQL exception, and we'll say update failed. And you know what? I think it's probably a good idea to do a console output on that too. Just so I don't have to retype it all. It's good to see it on the console, but we're going to say update failed. Alright folks, there's the code for that. There's the code for update. Right, pause the video, copy the code. Here's the code for clear. Pause the video, copy the code. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and start running this because we're out of time. Alright, so now we have update. So insert adds a new record, right? Well, let's confirm that that one works. Now I'm getting really lazy with the stuff I'm typing, so I'm getting very bored. So I'm going to insert a record. Yeah, I usually do something like that too. I usually go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that. One of my students just texted over, what they usually use for dummy records. And I'm going to insert this. Oh, we already did. Okay. All right. I'm going to hit clear. Cleared everything we see on the screen. I'm going to go up here. What was the ID number of that one? All fours. Let's view it. All right. Now that it's up on screen, I'm going to change the first name. Their first name is actually a name. We'll say Alan. And then I'm going to hit update. It says record updated. Let's make sure. Let's clear it. Let's type 444 and do a view. I want to make sure I can jump back to the database itself and take a look. So here we have a complete first exercise, and I am going to be adjusting the due date, so don't freak out, you guys, right? This chapter does take a while. I'm going to extend the due date out so we can get the other 2 exercises coded next week, because I think these are really, really valuable assignments. A lot of what you guys will do in application building will involve creating forms on the front end, whether it's from the web or from a GUI interface, have it tied to a database, and do exactly these types of
Database.
yeah, I mean, this is a very common type of thing to do. All right, folks, that wraps the class and this video, and I'll see y'all next week.